As everybody knows, this is the Chamber State of Education, so welcome everybody. I appreciate you joining us. My name's David Jerome. I'm with the Chamber, obviously. Let me just say a couple of announcement items first before I hand it over to the panelists here today. First, the Chamber takes part of the proceeds of all the ticket sales and uses them for the support directly of small, medium enterprise right now during COVID-19. And I just want to let everybody know how much we appreciate that, who's dialed in and joined today. So thank you for helping us with that mission. The other thing, obviously, though, state of education, and when we think about that, why would business be concerned with such a thing? And let me sort of lay that out for a second, and then we'll start properly. First of all, as you know, the Chamber is here to transform business and improve lives here in the El Paso metropolitan area. Now, we do that with business in mind because we consider business to be humanity's single greatest creation for, in terms of the, as an invention that drives jobs, it helps the community create wealth, it develops productivity. It's an entity, obviously, that's taxed to support education and things of this sort. So, but the thing about it is that to do all that, for business to be successful in that context, we have to have a prepared, well-educated workforce. And that's why business is very pleased to be hosting something like our State of Education. We are dependent on a well-educated workforce to be competitive, especially in this information age. This does, however, raise a couple of questions that I think we'll get to grips with today at some levels or another. One of them is that given the investment in taxes and otherwise that we put in education, do we get the outcomes we want? Now, not an easy question, and I don't mean it to be confrontational in any way, but it's an interesting issue. And it's in part, I think, interesting to have with this panel, not the usual people that we invite. We have been inviting the EPISDs, the presidents of universities and things like that separately. But this one we thought we would do differently with thinkers in the area that have had a lot of experience. And so I'm very interested to see how this discussion turns around some of these issues. Another one that I thought was interesting is like the negative impact that COVID-19 has had on business, it's also had a very heavy impact on education. It's changed education, I think, in some very interesting ways, some quite difficult, some I would imagine propelling education forward in some ways we hadn't necessarily anticipated this with this speed. So it's with that in mind that we are very pleased to host today. And today I'm going to be handing over the conversation to be moderated by Lizzie Choi. Now, Lizzie, I really appreciate you doing this. You'll introduce all the panelists, many of them who we know quite well and are very good friends with, Amy and Dr. Alozie and others. But I think just a little bit about you. From what I can see and what I've learned in talking to Nora and others that have set this up, you have a great deal of experience with K-12 education and talent development for leaders. And that's very interesting. And I think it'll serve us well today as we sort of go through this conversation. This includes hiring and organizational development, design, programming, and other things for K through 12 education leaders. And you've had focus, I think, on women and minorities and others and how you have done this. So I'm very proud to have you here today, Lizzie. Thank you so much. And if you're okay, I'm going to hand it over to you at this point. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, David. Thank you for having me today. We are honored to have everyone in the audience here with us, as well as this group of panelists as we explore the role and hopes for K-12 education sector in El Paso as we really enter into a new decade. You know, if we just take a moment and pause and think about the world 10 years ago, I think that you will definitely quickly realize that, gosh, 10 years ago, how different the world was. The opportunities we were talking about, the dialogues we were having, the ways we were working, the ways we were connecting with one another. So much can happen in a decade. And so as we were talking about what we wanted today's conversation to be about, we wanted to be able to take a moment, take a step back, and really think like, gosh, what else could happen in the next 10 years? What else could happen for our students, for our families, and for our community if we really thought creatively and thought together and worked together? And in many ways, this year has shown us that we are very much more connected than we often realize. And with that sentiment, we've invited local and national leaders here today from different sectors to explore in a dialogue and to share their perspectives. With us today, we have a very accomplished set of leaders here, and I'd love to introduce them. First, welcome to Nadia Diaz, a fierce advocate for equity and veteran public school educator for over 18 years and our current instructional coordinator at Clint ISD. Amy O'Rourke, former teacher and business owner, and now the Choose to Excel Director at the Council for Regional Economic Expansion and Educational Development, also known as CREEED, which is an organization committed to improving college and career options for high school students. We are fortunate to also have Lizzie Choi, a nationally certified school psychologist who has been working across multiple states, Massachusetts, Georgia, and also here in El Paso, Texas. She believes deeply in ecological and humanistic theories of assessment, program development, intervention, and service delivery. We also have Richard A. Castro, businessman, civic leader, philanthropist who has spent decades giving back to the communities that he serves. As board chairman of CREEED, Mr. Castro has a deep commitment to education throughout his time as a teacher, city manager, builder, and leader. He also leads over 24 McDonald's across West Texas. We also have Dr. Alozie, Chief Medical Officer at Del Sol Medical Center, El Paso's 2016 Best Doctor in the City. And he brings a passion and expertise for innovation in the healthcare sector and is a current parent in the K-12 system. We've also brought together voices that have been looking at innovation nationally. We have Arielle Rittro Kinder, who resides in Austin, Texas, and has held multiple roles within K-12 and philanthropy, and now works with districts, charter management organizations, and many other organizations across the US, designing and launching innovative school models. And finally, Dr. Christine DeLeon, who brings expertise in K-12 entrepreneurship, innovation, and talent development. She is the founder and CEO of Moonshot EdVentures, which is an organization that surfaces and supports a diverse set of leaders representative of the communities that they aim to serve to design and launch the schools and programs of tomorrow in Metro Denver. I hope that you're as excited as I am to learn from all of these experts here today, from near and from far. And with that, I would love to get started. I'd love for us to first explore sort of why think about education, why think about school redesign here. And so really, I would love to pose a question: what is the purpose of school? Like, why do we even invest in this system in the first place, and how has that evolved? To kick us off, I'd love Nadia to share your sentiments.
Oh, good morning, everybody. So that question to an educator, that is like a heavy question. And I thought about a myriad of ways of answering that. But at its absolute foundation and core, the purpose of school is to ensure that every student that comes into our classrooms receives an education that enables them to be ready for life, for that next thing, whatever that next thing is for them. So whether that be college or career or military, where all students are afforded the opportunity to learn in a classroom where there are rigorous lessons and engaging lessons, where there's high expectations for every student, regardless of last name, regardless of socioeconomic status, of race, of gender identity, where that high bar is set and it is the norm, not the exception. So we talk about how education has evolved, right? And COVID time, and maybe even like pre-COVID time. And I always think of when I was in school versus when I was teaching in front of my 22 kids, and how different that was. If we think back, and a great example of that is like math right now, and parents struggling with this new math. When we were in school, when I was in school, that purpose was content. right? It was the what. And now we're moving past that, right? We're moving into the how, a process, an application. And you know, to make sure that our kids are ready, we're now moving into the why, like an actual conceptual understanding of why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. So that's where we've seen education evolve. We're creating problem solvers and we're nurturing growth mindset in a classroom where there's all these moving parts. And we've seen those moving parts right now with COVID. And we can, you know, kind of, I'm super excited to flesh that out a little bit with all of you all.
Thank you, Nadia. I love, Lindsay, for you to sort of build on and add your thoughts also as someone who's been working within the K-12 system with students and families.
Absolutely. First of all, I agree with everything Nadia added. I think that is in many ways our supreme goal as educators and as educational establishments, is to create these well-rounded individuals to become productive citizens, not just in their communities, but within their own lives. You know, of course, as a school psychologist, I have to emphasize that social emotional learning component, and a lot of educational institutions, be it public schools or your other school choices, are really beginning to incorporate a lot more of that understanding of social emotional learning and paying attention to the growth responsibility that schools have in creating not just academically able students, but well-rounded little creatures. You know, and I say little creatures because we really have to focus on that early intervention, you know, implementing that solid foundation from the beginning that we can then build upon, so that by the time we do reach those upper levels, all of our kids are ready for that rigorous preparedness that we can give them. I think within COVID times, we have seen the exposure of the variety of roles that schools do play. That when you're working in education, I think you experience and see this on the daily. However, outside of educators, there isn't as much attention paid to the roles outside of academics that schools play, you know, such as that social emotional development, the reliance on schools to perform a lot more of your social welfare roles. You know, working in a lot of schools that have a very high rate of low socioeconomic status families, you know, we see more of that role and responsibility of schools to provide, you know, food for families. And I think a lot of districts have really stepped up during this time and helped with addressing a lot of that food insecurity that families are experiencing due to job loss during COVID. But we also see the exposure of, you know, access and inequity, inequities to resources, be it healthcare, be it, you know, access to affordable daycare. I think a lot of those types of issues are being exposed from COVID. And while, you know, those of us in education think, you know, those have been difficulties that we've been approaching for a very long time. I think now, being on the forefront of everyone's mind, we're opening the discussion to how can we address those issues and make them, you know, more effective for the community as a whole, rather than just relying solely on schools.
Thank you so much. I'd love to get reactions from the group or additions as well.
This is Arielle. First of all, thank you for having me. And I just want to yes and everything that Nadia and Lindsay said. And I think Nadia created a beautiful foundation for us to build upon. And to that end, I think the one addition I might make is I think that education is also here, or the purpose of education is really to support young people in developing their own purpose, so that as they traverse the world, they have a sense of who they are, what they want to do, and are actively choosing to make decisions in their lives as to how they want to pursue their happiness, their dreams. And ideally, education is supporting them in developing that purpose through exposure to a variety of different things, and to help them really hone in on who they are and what they want to be and what they want to do.
So we just raised up this idea of like helping students gain their purpose. So I would love to hear from this group, like what are the things we have to do to actually allow students to gain in their skills, to feel emotionally safe, and to be able to, find their own purpose.
I'll jump in here. It's Christine. So, again, I echo what the panelists said. I mean, I think if we actually look historically, to also kind of build this on your first question, Lizzie, I mean, school used to be about preparing folks to work in factories. It was meant to prepare, it was like a sorting mechanism in so many ways. And so this new idea of actually like seeing every student in order to help them see their purpose is not always how education was carried out. And so I think that's actually really, really important to say, because I think there's still, like, I'm sure folks have seen this, like classrooms from 100 years ago to classrooms to today can sometimes look exactly the same, except there's not a chalkboard, there is like a smart board, right? But students are still looking at the front of the classroom. And I think part of where I think Arielle's going, Nadia and Lindsay are saying, is just like, we actually need to fundamentally almost like break down how we've thought about education and build it back up. Because when we think about how we work in the workplace, we're not sitting 30 in a seat watching I mean, we sometimes do that. It's not the most effective, right? But we're collaborating with each other, we're problem solving with each other, and we're talking about who we are, we're bringing who we are into that space. I actually don't think that's always what students have felt in a classroom. I would say, to Lindsay's point, right, the folks who have been deemed minorities are going to become, if they aren't already, the majority, right? And many of those students, and that's part of who we try to serve, is the students that have been marginalized, forgotten. They oftentimes don't even see themselves in the world, right? They either don't see themselves in certain careers, they don't see themselves in the educators who are teaching them. And it's hard to find purpose if you can't see, like, what's my end goal, or what can I be? And so I say that because I think there's a lot here that is both about kind of like breaking down how we've thought about school, but also like who's leading school and what are they exposed to, right? And I know this goes to a later question, but I think that's why that exposure to so many different career paths and seeing and knowing every student is so important. It's a lot of stuff, but I just wanted to kind of build on that from the purpose question to your new question.
So this is Richard, and obviously it's crucial to have a well-educated workforce and community. However, as a result of the pandemic and the schools going to virtual classes, we learned that neither the school systems, the students, or the families were prepared for this kind of a system. So consequently, a lot of our students fell behind in their classes, which is a real huge shame, because prior to the pandemic, our educational system in El Paso, the Region 19, was showing huge academic strides. And a lot of our students were performing well above the state average in the state testing. In fact, our Region 19 was leading the state, was #1 in the percent of students performing at the meets or the master's level, which is the college ready level in Algebra 1. We at CREEED feel that our commitment to increase the educational attainment by preparing students for college and career ready has not changed. But we do think that there are opportunities to see what is working well within the educational system and to expand on those opportunities and initiatives. At the same time, allow the districts to be innovative. An example of that is our Canutillo School District with their Algebra 1 program in the middle schools. And their goal is to have every student, every 8th grade student take Algebra 1. And through CREED's sponsorship, and we're in our second year of sponsoring their Algebra 1 program in middle school, we are hoping that that goal is achieved, which will prepare all the 8th grade students in algebra and give them the opportunity to take higher math courses while in high school. And as we know, Algebra 1 is one of the biggest indicators of being college ready and helping them get into college and graduate from college.
Okay, so Mr. Castro has sort of started us down this path of like, great, so we want all these things and we want to help, you know, our learners sort of achieve a higher level. And so one of the things to do is sort of like add this like additional opportunity and rigor through like the math course. And so that's definitely like one theory of action. I'd love to hear others also share reactions to that or additional sorts of theories on sort of great, like where do we need to place a bet? What would it look like if we only had limited resources, which we do, limited time, which we do, and energy, like where should we put our energy to be able to sort of get at a lot of these outcomes that we started this conversation with. Don't all be too shy.
I'll go ahead and jump in and just start. I'm not going to put this question alone, but I'll give you a start, at least from my realm of the educational world. You know, I think with the movement to social emotional learning curriculums, we have seen a lot of schools start to adopt those types of programs. However, I think there's a lot more that we can do in that area. You know, with the adoption of school-wide PBIS systems, you know, research and data has shown a lot of direct impacts on academic skills, decreases in dropout rates, higher attendance rates. And so, you know, while a lot of educators or those in the field may be quick to dismiss, you know, the social emotional learning parts of education, you know, we really do see in a lot of the research that strengthening those skills, especially early on, directly correlates with educational attainment. And so I think that's definitely an area that we can address. You know, building those supports, you know, not just your, you know, 10-minute social emotional circles in the morning, but really implementing those school-wide supports to create learners that are more available to academic skills and more motivated to achieve higher levels.
So I'd like to maybe add on to that. And I'm going to actually go back to something that Christine talked about where we are at this point in education where we've just had this massive change that we can take as this opportunity, right? I always say it's one of my favorite things to say is one of the most dangerous phrases in the English language is to say, because we've always done it this way, right? And we do that. I mean, you are very right. You can have classrooms that look exactly the same, minus a chalkboard, it's a whiteboard, right? But right now, we can't even echo that quote because no one's ever done this, right? We're flying the plane and building it at the same time. So what can we take from right now? Lindsay, you took one set of words out of my mouth, is that focus on SEL, the social emotional. But right now, because we're living it, we really are talking about social emotional health, right? That's one aspect for kids and teachers, right? Because they're humans too in the classroom. And the second thing I think that we can take from this, and I open it up to anybody else to really expound on this next point, is the utilization of technology, right? We've brought in these whiteboards and Promethean boards, and we have all of these things. And maybe in the last 3-4 years, we use them as like an extra, right? We would do the lesson and then kind of, have kids play around with the technology. And now, because we had to like flip the script, remote learning, no longer allowed for that. Now we had to utilize technology as a way of doing things, which was totally different for those of us in education. And I think that really is that next step to get our students ready for what comes after. So I think that those are two areas that I would really like to look at.
So hooking on to the comments on technology, I think that certainly showed a huge challenge for certain sectors of our community, especially the low, middle, and low income communities, which we found a lot of these families did not have access to network services, didn't have the hardware service of a computer or a laptop. As we went along, I think that the community and the school districts adjusted and started being much more proactive, providing hotspots in those parts of the community that didn't have them, and providing even the equipment in the form of laptops to a lot of the students in order to help them keep up with the new system of the virtual classes. But there were additional challenges, in relationship to the family environment. How many families were not prepared or able to help their students with virtual classes? How many were not able to be at home while the students were having to take these virtual classes? And how many were not prepared because of lack of formal education, especially in English? So the economic ability to provide tutors for those students. And as you go down in grade levels from high school to elementary, those challenges got even greater. So that technology that was brought up by Nadia is very real, but something that the community and the district stepped up and were able to address because it was concrete. What Lindsay brought up in reference to the social and health, I see that as a huge challenge, and not sure how the districts can address that. I mean, the teachers have their hands full just trying to keep the students up to grade level and getting them where we're pushing for, and that is to the meets and the master's level on the testing, because numbers show that at the meets and the master's level, they will have a greater opportunity, they'll be better prepared to be successful post-secondary. So the teachers have their hands full. So who does that responsibility fall on? The counselors? Well, we know that the counselors at the rate of students to counselor aren't going to be able to provide that kind of a service. They have their hands full just trying to provide services and working with the students to teach them about how to apply for college and how to apply for scholarships. There are huge challenges. Perhaps one of the learnings that we've had from the virtual classes is to use virtual classes in relationship to the counseling service. If that is done, then obviously, or hopefully, more students could be reached, because the one-on-one system that has traditionally been used is very limited in being able to reach a large number of students. What some schools in higher learning are finding out, that one of the advantages of the virtual classes is being able to reach a lot more students than on person to person.
And Amy, you go first. I'll go after you.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Alozie. I would say one of the things that has been a net positive from our experience during COVID is just a far deeper appreciation for teachers and the critical role that they play in our community. And so I hope through that appreciation, we have broader support to be able to invest in our teachers. We've seen in El Paso a collective effort to really focus on that teacher pipeline to ensure that we are preparing those that are wanting to enter the profession, treating them more like your future doctors who have to go through medical school and a residency. We're trying to provide a similar type experience for our incoming teachers. So in the next 3 years, every teacher that graduates from UTEP will have gone through a full year of residency with the best teachers in the schools, mentoring them and providing that daily coaching. Because teaching is one of the most important professions in our country, and we need to treat it as such. Building off that teacher residency for teacher candidates, we're also working with the districts across El Paso to pilot a mentorship program for teachers in their first, second, third year of teaching, modeling it after the exceptional program at Clint ISD, so that teachers in their first 3 years feel the support and receive the coaching that they need to be the most effective teacher in the classroom, and to also keep them in the classroom. Research shows that almost 50% of teachers leave after those first 3 years because they just aren't receiving the support that they need. So I'm really excited about the direction we're going in El Paso with our teachers. And I think it's going to be a model that communities across the country will look to as a sustainable form of support and validation of the great teachers that we have.
Yeah, and I think all these comments have been great, right? So sort of, in my words, tie together Amy's comments and Richard's comments. I think technology is a key, but technology can't be the standalone, right? We have to tie the technology to the human aspect. And so I think one of the things that was surprising to many, it shouldn't really have been a surprise, is that as we went into COVID and the whole sort of from home standpoint, whether it's work from home, school from home, engage in home, we were not prepared. I mean, that's just the reality, right? And from a teacher standpoint, we weren't prepared. Teachers used technology like they used paper. And that's been, for me, the biggest disappointment. And it happens in healthcare too, right? We've taken paper and we said, well, we have a tablet now. Let's do exactly what we did on paper on this tablet. And as somebody that's talked about the whole concept of digital immigrant, right? It wasn't surprising that at least a fourth, maybe more, 40 to 50% of our teaching workforce were not comfortable in technology. That wasn't their de novo space. That's not how they were groomed and trained, and not how they had practiced. And so to go to what Nadia was talking about, we've always done it like that. They tried to always do it like that with technology. So I think that was one of our failings. I think the conversation that Amy brought up about how do you pair those teachers that may not be the technology piece of the classroom, right? But they have that human, experiential, one-on-one dynamic. How do you teach them with those new teachers coming out the gates that are much better trained, have done a residency, and know how to actually utilize technology to its fullest capacity, not just turning paper into a tablet, bind them together. Right, that's where you get that best really outcome, because as Lindsay was talking about, then that's where you can sort of tie in that emotional aspect of the experiential teacher, the technology that they're going to need, whether it's an algebra or calculus or chemistry, going forward in a world that's highly competitive and getting even more competitive every second, right? Also understanding that if somebody's asking, well, where do we place that bet? I think Lizzie talked about, well, where do we place a bet? The bet has to be on technology and improving the teacher pipeline, right? If those are the two things that somebody on this conference call or this Zoom says, hey, where am I going to put 2 million over the next 2 years? It has to be in ensuring, as Richard talked about, that we have a technological backbone across the city so that somebody without internet can get onto a hotspot. Right, whether it's putting wireless antennas on top of my hospital or a tenant hospital or a UMC hospital. So the neighborhoods around them all have that kind of broadband access, right? Whether it's ensuring that the education available to teachers allows them to make dynamic learning plans. And again, not turning paper into a tablet. And then last but not least, ensuring that the pipeline of teachers over the next decade is prepared to come into the world to teach the next generation of kids. And I think those are all very important pieces.
I agree with a lot of what Dr. Alozie said around those two bets around technology and teacher education and preparation. I also think it, to Christine's earlier point, if you put more technology and more teachers into a system that hasn't changed in the last 100 years and is not serving the needs of students in the way that it should be, then we're missing a component of the equation. And I think this moment in time presents an opportunity that has almost never been presented before. And back to what, again, Dr. Alozie said earlier around teachers were not prepared. And, at the beginning of this pandemic, I don't think anyone knew it was coming. I do think people have taken a step back over the summer and said, okay, like whatever I did for that last semester of school did not work. How do I actually recover to think about reinvention, and what might I do differently? And what are the things that I'm seeing that are stoking my thoughts around what I might do differently? I mean, all of a sudden, every parent has become an educator and a teacher and has a lens into their child's day in a way that they never have before. And I think there are educators out there saying, like, how do I leverage that relationship between parents that never existed before to really think differently about how we are collectively into the education of my child together and our children together, as opposed to it being the school that is the only place that is responsible. I think that there have been a lot of to the teacher question. I think there have been a lot of innovative strategies given the technology around having a master teacher that is giving a direct instruction lesson for all students, and then having younger, less experienced teachers do small group with those students to unpack that lesson and to really dig deeply and provide that one-on-one, three-on-one support. And then I think there's been a question around, does the brick and mortar space that schools hold have to be the place where all instruction and education happens? How do we think differently about where young people learn, how they learn, and how we give them credit for that? Why does biology have to be taught in a biology class? Couldn't my child take an EMT course and become a certified EMT and simultaneously, have a certification that allows them to earn an income and simultaneously meet that biology degree? And so a lot of that is just for me to say that I think there's a bet right now to be made around the redesign of school, and school fundamentally changing in this moment because of this moment, but changing for the better for the future.
It's really interesting what Arielle is bringing up, because I'm thinking a lot actually about both schools and families, right, that were doing some really interesting things before the pandemic happened. So I think about schools and families, right, where they're like student agency, right, letting students be in charge of their learning, having teachers be facilitators of that learning rather than just the content holders. some of the schools where that happened, those kids could take charge of their learning at home because they're like, I know how to do this. I've done this in school. And so I'm not waiting for my teacher to tell me what to do at what time for me to actually go ahead with my learning, right? But that's really hard. And this goes to the point around teacher pipeline. And I really get to Dr. Alozie's point around teacher preparation. What are we preparing how are we preparing our teachers to teach, right? How are we telling them, are you the owner of all the information, or do you facilitate an experience that brings in families, that brings in businesses to hold internships, and actually brings in students, right? A big part of how we're thinking about our work is saying, students know a lot more than we give them credit for. And we oftentimes don't even ask them what it is they want out of school, and they can tell you, right? So there's brilliance kind of all around a student and all around a school community that I think if we can get teachers to be prepared to figure out how do we pull all these different pieces in and put students in charge of their learning, that's a very different kind of system. And I've seen those parents in those schools where students have taken charge of their learning before COVID actually almost seamlessly move into this environment. But that one isn't what most folks are in, right? People are scared to let that control go. I get it, right? As adults, we want to figure out how we control a classroom of 30 students. Like, that is a frightening thing to say. Every student in this room now gets to figure out, what their pathway is. But if we actually decenter ourselves as adults and put students at the center, we come up with something radically different and become much more ready for the next pandemic or whatever it is that's going to, jar up the system. And I don't think this is the last time. This may be the last kind of viral pandemic we go through, but I don't think it's the last time we'll see something in the future change that we weren't prepared for. And I'm thinking a lot about, is that the student's job, or is it the teacher's job, or is it the teacher's job to support the student, no matter what kind of environment might come up?
Just a hook on what Arielle and Christine both said, and that is in reference to adjusting, if you will, the school system in order to be able to reach a greater number or percent of students that we have traditionally identified as top students. Everybody knows that the top 10, the top 20% of the students are probably going to go on to have a successful post-secondary career and probably life. But how do you reach those other 30, 40% beyond that? And that's the real challenge. The state of Texas set a goal of 60 by 30. 60% of our folks between 25 and 34 having a post-secondary certificate or degree. So it starts from K through 12. And how are we going to adjust in order to have our students prepared? As I noted earlier, in the El Paso region, we had great success in Algebra 1. We weren't there, we haven't always been there, but we're there now, where we were leading the state in percent of students in Algebra 1. But the challenge continues to be in English. So when we look at our performance in the state testing in English 2, we have a huge challenge. So how do we adjust the system to be able to have the same success in having our students progress in the areas of, as an example, English, like they did in math, so that we can truly have a college-ready, prepared student? Some of the things that we've learned as CREEED and that we have worked with the school districts with, and I've got to give huge credit to our districts because they have been great partners. And we have seen the intensity rise in an effort to improve those numbers. And what our goal, part of our goals, and when I say our goals, I'm talking about CREEED and the school system, is to have as many students as possible graduate with at least 12 hours of dual credit or early college courses. Why? Because it found that if they have at least that many college courses while in high school, are more likely to be successful. What we want to see is 70% of our graduating students be at that level. And so then we can say that we will be able to reach the 60% goal, which of course will benefit our community in this entire state of Texas. But how are those adjustments going to be made now so that moving forward, we can continue to show that progress?
So I think, and I'm a data person too, so I love Mr. Castro, when you bring up like that algebra data, that English data, and I think it all goes back to this idea of productive struggle, like what Christine was talking about, and really honing in on learner agency. And as veteran teachers coach newer teachers, right, so that it doesn't become a system where I'm the teacher, I am the wealth of knowledge, let me impart onto you, you know, and be this sage on the stage and give you the things that I know. And I think that we're at this moment where we can start shifting and really look at the resources that we're spending money on in schools. Because are the resources that we're spending on in schools, do they allow for what we call that lift, right? Who's doing the lift in the classroom, teacher or student? And really it goes back to even the mechanisms that we have in a classroom, right? Evaluation systems, assessment. What do those things value, right? And so really it's this time where we have to look at all of those things plus what we're spending money on and our resources, so that we say, yes, growth mindset isn't just a thing that we say. Growth mindset is that lift. Growth mindset is, it might take you some time, right, to work through this, but you understand why you're doing it. And I just think that that's that next step.
I also think that there needs to be a recognition that not all schools need to be the exact same, and that each community needs its own unique strategy and approach that is really going to bring that entire community around the vision of that school, and set that very high expectation for all students, so that parents buy into it, students buy into it, teachers, and that it's really driven by that school leader, and that they are able to develop a vision that taps into the richness of their community, and that the content that they're using in that school is culturally relevant, and that, going back to what you all have said, that enables students to begin to build that agency to solve problems that they're seeing on a daily basis, and that in doing so they begin to address those issues that they're facing in their community, and that builds that sense of purpose that will, you know, encourage them to do well in school, and then to pursue something that will continue that purpose going forward. I was laughing with someone the other day because I have an 8th grader that's taking algebra right now, and he's struggling a lot, and I loved algebra, so I'm, you know, getting really excited to tutor him. And going back, Nadia, to what you said earlier, he was like, why do I need to learn this? I'm not going to, you know, study math. I don't want to go into a career that uses math. Why do I need to learn this? And I joked with him, and I was like, so that you can tutor your kid when he's in 8th grade. But there needs to be a connection and a relevance between what our students are learning in school and how that applies to the real world. And I think that there are so many opportunities to do that by bringing in your immediate community, but then also reaching out beyond that and tapping into the business sector and bringing in people from the community that can articulate how what they're learning in the real world in their classroom directly applies to the real world.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to start inviting audience questions into our conversation here in the last 10 minutes. And so if anyone has a question for the panelists, go ahead and type them in and we'll be able to pepper them throughout. Would love to start with one of the questions from the group, very much sort of to your point, Amy, of like, what else are other people doing? What role can small business play in elevating education?
So one thing I will jump in and just as an example, you know, kind of, you know, adding on to what Amy was saying about making things relatable and the meaning making that we need to establish for kids. You know, we want them to be self-motivated and that self-agency, but if it's not meaningful, you know, the motivation isn't going to be there as much. You know, when I worked in Boston, Massachusetts, there were some schools that did, you know, junior, senior year partnered with local businesses and did like job training and co-op kinds of programs. And so being able to open the door to what we're doing in the educational setting and how that applies to the real world setting. And I think that for a lot of kids creates that bridge of meaning making, of expanding into the why. Why am I doing this? Why is it important? I think that, you know, those kinds of partnerships, whether it's a co-op type partnership, volunteer opportunities, I think the more that we can do and across different types of businesses and different types of agencies within the community really helps to make that connections for kids.
I think in reference to business participation, CREEED is a good example of working directly with the school districts, providing resources to the school systems. In the case of CREEED, providing scholarships for teachers to help them get back to college and get their master's degree. In our case, we're promoting certification in dual credit courses so that dual credit classrooms could be expanded, more dual credit students could take classes. In reference to individual businesses being involved and contributing. One way that we contribute in my organization is providing reimbursement, college reimbursements. This year we're up to $57,000 in reimbursements, providing English as a second language. And we have a certified teacher that comes in and provides English as a second language to our employees. So there's a lot of proactiveness that business community can do, and that it's important that we come together as a community and understand that education has got to be the #1 issue because education can open the doors of opportunity, and education is an economic developer for individuals as well as for the community, which enables everybody to have a better life.
I also think, you know, I think people, when you ask about how to bring the business community in, it often is, can you offer internships, or can you have some folks from your team come present to students at our school? And I think that's great, but I think that there could be a much more innovative way to approach it, where businesses, particularly small businesses that may not have, you know, multiple departments that are solving all of their problems at once, is for small businesses to pose a problem to a group of students. And oftentimes those students are going to see that problem and see it with a totally different mindset than the small business has been looking at it, and encourage students to problem solve around that business, because then they're going to need to learn about that business. But then also they're going to be adding value back beyond just answering phones or making copies. It's asking them to perform at a much higher level.
In reference to one of the questions that's on the chat is from a school district individual, is how to get more businesses involved with the school system. You know, from my perspective, I would think that direct contact. A lot of times, even if businesses want to get involved, may not know how or may not have thought about it. So direct contact with the businesses is a good way to start that relationship and start getting that interest hyped, or at least the education of how to be involved. And I would venture to say that most businesses would be willing to take part and be part of the school systems. You know, one example of that is through the business partnerships with the schools. There's a tremendous amount of businesses that partner with the schools in one way or another, but may not participate on boards or committees or on an individual basis. I think those relationships need to be nurtured and developed.
When at my organization, when we go through a design process with a school community, we start with this idea of a graduate profile, and we ask the question, what are the habits, mindsets, and skills that you would want a young person to leave your school community knowing, doing, being able, seeing. And I can imagine that as a group of small businesses, as a chamber coming to a school community, or even to some of the ISDs within your community, and partnering with the district, with schools, and thinking about, collectively as a community, what are the habits, skills, and mindsets that we want young people to leave our system with, especially when you think about the fact that these businesses are often the ones that are employing students leaving, that connection and being there to raise opinions and voice what you think is important, I think would be wildly beneficial to schools, because without that graduate profile, without knowing sort of what the North Star is, it's very difficult to go and design student experience that will realize that North Star. And without the voice of business in that conversation, you're missing an essential component of that graduate profile.
I actually have a quick question for our panel. And I think that some of the members on the panel would be really great with answering this, is how can we utilize businesses within the community, whether it's your small, medium businesses or your larger ones, to help support some of those wraparound services that, that we know are beneficial for students, for their educational attainment, as well as supporting families.
I just think this goes to Amy's point, which is every community is different and therefore has a different set of assets surrounding a school community at any time. When we work with innovators and folks who want to start schools, they're thinking a lot about, how do I bring in a clinic, right, where students can learn, but also get some of the health services that oftentimes are what's needed for them to actually learn in a classroom. Sometimes we forget about those basic needs. And to the point around small businesses, I mean, if we are asking our students to be creators and innovators, to be next to a business that is creating and innovating all the time, that's what small businesses do. I mean, those are really interesting places to be, both learning places for the students, but as Amy mentioned, right, like places for students to contribute. So I don't know, I mean, I think it all depends on like what, to Arielle's point, like, what is the purpose of that particular school? What's the graduate profile? And how do we build in all of these experiences? And I think depending on the business, depending on its characteristics, there's lots of ways to always thoughtfully integrate them. And it's going to be different everywhere, because every school is surrounded by a different set of businesses and other types of organizations that can support a school community. But I agree. I think seeing a school and teachers not being like the end all be all and the 100 jobs they have to play. I mean, I think that is where there's real power in the innovation of saying, can we build up this community to be the educating community, rather than, can I count on this one teacher to be, in charge of social emotional learning and content in every single area, and the healthcare worker, and the person who can handle crisis, and the technology specialist. Like, it's too much to ask. And I think it does require us, again, maybe we don't even just break down school, we break down like, how do we think about what a community's role is?
All right. Well, I believe we are at time here. So I want to just take a moment to thank everyone for the conversation, and hopefully you've been able to sort of think a little bit differently about where we might be able to go over the next 10 years. And so just huge gratitude to the panelists for your thinking and for your hard work and making that a reality every day for our students and our community. So thank you. I believe the chamber is going to come back and share a few thoughts before we head out.
Yes, I am. So thank you, David. And I want to thank all of our panelists for participating and providing their insightful, thoughtful comments in this morning's session. There was some great dialogue going on with our panelists. And I agree with Amy in that this pandemic has brought a whole new level of respect for our educators. And as a parent, I can personally attest to that. And so we are in unprecedented times, and the pandemic has forced everyone, starting from our teachers, administrators, parents, and our business community, to come together in figuring out how to provide quality online education that without a doubt has many challenges that we will be able to reflect back on and fix for all of our K through 12 students. So with that, I want to thank our star sponsors for supporting this morning's meeting. So please stay on for a few moments to review our list. And once again, thank you and have a great day.
Thank you, Arlene, and thank you to all our panelists and to the folks who participated today. Please just also note that we have the State of the County on Wednesday morning as well. And let me just also extend another heartfelt thanks to everybody on the panel. I think that was a terrific conversation. Thank you, and have a great day. Bye now.